And so, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Quiara and Dascha to the stage.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, my beautiful Quiara. How are you?
I'm great, Dascha. So nice to see you on such an exciting night.
Such an exciting night. A night that we must all thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for taking the time to spend this evening with us with my lovely Quiara Alegria Hudes and her memoir, My Broken Language. And without further ado, I wanted to just dive right in because I have so much to ask and so much to hear, and I'm sure that the audience as well does. Now, a little bit about us and how we met. Quiara, I've always been a fan of your work, and you're an icon in the community of women writers, and in our Latin community as well, especially for the stories that you bring forth and how necessary in these times we need to hear our voices. And I think it's important that we have women like you in the forefront that are brave enough to say our stories and to bring such enlightenment to the diversity that is so necessary. I had the honor of being part of the film adaptation in the Heights 2 years ago now. And 2 years ago now, and I must say that it was so fun, but so important for me as an actress to bring to life this role of Cuca and the flavor that it brought and what it meant in the story. And for those that don't know, yes, Cuca is a new role in the Heights, but that's when Quiara fell in love with me, right? Right? Is that one?
Right. Absolutely.
It was a great time and a great project that we will soon be able to see in the masses on HBO Max. But let's take this moment to really speak about this gem that I had the privilege of spending my last month reading and enjoying. And I know that you've written music and you've written screenplays and award-winning plays, but what made you want to write this memoir, and when did you know the right time to start it?
I'm so glad I waited this long to write a book. I was saying that to my husband last night. I kind of dipped my toes in writing poems as a child, writing stories as a child. Then I began playwriting. And I always knew, my pop was always like, when you're gonna write your book, sweetheart? And I was like, I don't know. But he asked me that because he knew, he could feel it in me, and I could feel it too. And honestly, the thing that instigated it was my editor, Chris Jackson. I read some books that he edited. In particular, I read Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me. That was very impactful for me and really powerful thoughts and powerful language. I read Bryan Stevenson's Just Mercy, which really floored me and is about criminal justice work, which I'm interested in. And then I also read Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. And I thought, wow, this editor is incredible. This is who I would like to edit my book. And he said yes. So that's what started it. I really wanted someone who was at the top of his game, since it was going to be my first time out the gate.
Right. All it takes is one person that you feel will support you and that you need to push you forward. And I think it's perfect timing. I mean, what better than now, right? To tell your story. I mean, there's so much that I learned from reading it from you that I think you can encompass in a conversation and while we're working, but so admirable. And so it's interesting to see how the title, My Broken Language, was so luring for me, because I was like, what does she mean by broken language? Does she just mean this, the linguistic area of it? And it kind of sent me into a world of, no, language it's a variable, and it comes whether it's linguistically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and I was able to experience that along your life, right? Depicted in your story, and especially the setting and the time and to see how influential the women in your life were through activism, through just embracing their own self. And so most of the story is set in Philadelphia in the 1980s and 1990s during the height of the AIDS epidemic. And you talk about that, and you talk about how it affected you directly, indirectly, but also segregation in the city, and how involved your mother was in the community and as an activist. And I want to really take the time for you to just set the scene a little more about you growing up in Philly, and what it was like for you and your family, and the movement. There was a lot of movement. It's like the dance of it.
Yeah.
So you could take the time to really express the time of this, like.
Yeah. I mean, there's actually a line in my In the Heights screenplay where the father says, "We're a people on the move." And I think that the book tells that story just in a much more personal way because it's my memoir. You know, the movement started way before me. And then I was kind of the next step in the path. It started when, actually it predates my mom, my abuela, Obdulia Perez, Abuela Juja, rest in heaven. She was from Lares, Puerto Rico. And they left. And they left in a rush and they moved to Arecibo. And there's a lot of family speculation about why that was, but it was a hotbed of nationalism, of the Puerto Rican nationalist movement. And my great grandmother, Baldomera, had a breast injury, and it's speculated in the family that she lost part of her breast to a bullet wound during a protest. And so then they moved to Arecibo in Puerto Rico, a town in Puerto Rico, and didn't talk about where they were from because that was a way to identify yourself as politically distant. And then my mom ends up coming to Philadelphia when she's a young teenager, or like a teen, when she's like 12.
Right.
And then I come along, and all of those migrations that happen involve different languages. So that's how the language is moving with us. And one of the things I go into early in the book, I'm in West Philly. I'm born in West Philly, born and raised. One of the things I go into in the book is how my parents speak different languages. Additionally, they speak different spiritual languages. My dad is an atheist. My mom is like a shaman. She's a very gifted spiritual woman. There's no denying it.
Mm-hmm.
And so even learning these sorts of different languages from them, there's so many different languages in my life that one I consistently end up relying on is body language, because I stay at my abuela's house because everyone spoke like English or Spanish or Spanglish, like different levels. Like bodies were the one thing that never got lost in translation. So we would dance, we would touch each other, we would kiss each other, we would playing bingo was very physical, cooking was very physical, you know? And so that body language also we would heal each other. We were each other's caretakers and nurses. So that body language was very much a part of how I was raised too. And this was during the time of, as you mentioned, the AIDS epidemic, which I guess the word epidemic kind of got there at some point, but when you're in the middle of something, you kind of don't know what it is. So to me as a child, I didn't understand it. All I understood was, why are my cousins, my young, strapping, amazing cousins who I admire, why are they sick? Why are they skinny? Why am I at their funeral? And even though my mother was a huge advocate, as you mentioned, in the community for women's health, for health justice, even my mother couldn't give me a straight answer. There was so much silence around these painful subjects. It was also the time of addiction. We're losing family members to addiction. They're disappearing. And again, there was silence around that. And part of that silence was probably to protect me because I was a child and these are kind of adult topics. But that wasn't the only reason. I think part of the silence was because in the media, the story that was told about our community was so nasty. so derogatory that in some ways silence, it felt like the only part of our narrative we could control. And you mentioned, as we were talking about it, that this feels timely and why now. And I think another reason why now is because as a family, like that was then, we have different problems as a community now.
Right.
And so as a family, those old silences, like we actually might not need them anymore. And it might be a time when we can safely start to talk about the things that had so much shame around them, the things that had so much suffering around them. We did survive. Through body language, through dance, through celebration and joy, we survived a lot. And so maybe those old silences are, a thing of the past, and we can start to discuss what was that moment that we lived through in the 80s and 90s.
Right. And it was so taboo, right?
So taboo.
It was taboo. I thinking about not knowing that, hey, having a disease does not take away having family, right? And I think that there was a point where it was like, you have a disease and you have to be isolated and you have to be forgotten. And we forgot as kids also that the questions, right? We were scared to even ask questions. There was moments where you hesitated and you wanted to ask the question and you were brave enough to say, you know what, I'm going to ask the question, because we weren't allowed to ask adult questions. And I think that it doesn't take for us to be, from Philly or to be Latin or so forth to feel that tension as a child as to, I'm seeking answers and I'm confused and I want to know, because it just doesn't make sense. And you did a beautiful way of writing about your curiosity and your sensitivity towards it and how aware you were at such a young age. Hats off to you for that.
Taboo, Dascha. And there's the passage in the book where my cousin Pico comes from the island, and my mom, houses him. He was a young man. He must have been in his early 20s. And he was clearly, whether or not he was out, he was clearly queer. And he didn't hide his demeanor. He didn't act macho on top of it. And I loved him. The pretense was he was going to be my nanny, but I was a teenager. I didn't need a nanny. I was already a kid. So we just hung out. We played together every day after school. We had so much fun. I helped teach him English. He helped me work on my Spanish. And then one day he's gone. And we didn't know why. We didn't know what happened. We thought, okay, well, he's a young man. He went to go have fun, whatever. And we found out he had gone to New York. He got tested positive and left out of shame. He didn't want to tell us, even though it was clear who he was. He did not hide who he was. And that hit home. He died alone without us taking care of him. And that was so painful. And I write in the book that the only thing worse than having a funeral for your young cousin is not even getting the funeral.
Right.
So that was one of the moments where the silence equals death, that was posted all over the city, that hit home so much. And if silence equals death, I thought, well, then the alternative is speech and storytelling and words. I think that really tipped me in a pathway of storytelling.
Definitely did. And one of the things that I must say is your mother and her bravery and her activism. I mean, la operación, right? When I read that, and, I come from a medical background as well, and, we don't really know, well, we're taught factual and biology, but we're not taught the history of socialism in the health field, right? And what has affected our communities. And reading that section there of how your mom, it's heroic for me. Can you speak a little about that and her activism?
This is another example of how silences that happen in communities for pragmatic reasons, at a certain point, they are no longer necessary. So back in the island, coerced sterilization was pretty much rampant. At one point in the 50s and 60s, Puerto Rico had the highest sterilization rate in the world, which was 1/3. And in Arecibo, I know that my abuela, Obdulia Perez, she went and had her, it was they said, come try our experimental birth control. They never said it was permanent. So it really was coerced sterilization. You know, they offered the ladies a free bus ride and a little cash or something. Now, in our family's case, it wasn't as devastating because abuela already had a lot of children. But many women came who weren't ready to have children. And they're already being brave because family planning is a little controversial, you know. It's like, have more kids, have more kids. So my abuela actually was sterilized during her pregnancy with my mom because, again, she was not informed as to what exactly this was. Now, no one told anyone. Actually, the elementary school shuttered in that town and in many other towns because birth rates dropped so far. Now, fast forward to North Philly, my mother, one of her kind of spiritual and healing gifts is that she can give therapeutic massage. So my abuela had scoliosis, and she was giving abuela one of these scoliosis massages and sees this little scar on her abdomen that she had never noticed before. And she's like, Mami, ¿qué es esto? And Mommy, what is this? And abuela's like, nothing. And that playing off of it, my mom was like, no. You're going to tell me what this is. What is this? And abuela said, you know, it's la operación. And so that, finding out the history of that made a huge impact on my mom. Abuela had not even told anyone that. So what does my mom do? The next generation, rather than keep the silence around that, because women were ashamed. They were ashamed to be barren. What my mom does is she finds the female doctors and gynecologists who uncovered these abuses, brought them to light, and my mom invites them to Philly, leads a national conference on sterilization abuse in what was then called the Hispanic community, in the Latino community. And so my mom, I kind of am following in her footsteps, just in a different field, in terms of taking these silences and saying, okay, now it's safe to speak, and not only safe, but necessary.
And that's exactly what I concluded from watching the reflection and the influence of family and your mother's heroic, your grandmother's, and how it just transfers down from generation to generation. And sometimes language barriers, right, put us in situations out of our control, but also breaking that barrier through and speaking about it, and through your writing or through activism, moves the dial in such a way that we don't even realize how much impact we actually cause. And one of the most memorable parts of the book is when you first get your period, which is something that I love to speak about because it's like another taboo thing, right? Oh God, you can't bear children, and also you get your period, right? And for the first time, I was like, yes, Six Flags. I remember the can of Cokes or the soda or the whatever it was, and you get to go in and you get to have a great time at Six Flags. But just before that, we were very similar, that we both get car sick. And I'm like, oh my God, Quiara, I can feel you. Your first time getting your period, you're in a car. What's going on? And your big, the way that you depicted it, it's just so vivid. You write so vividly, Quiara, that I was like there. I actually felt like, oh, am I PMSing right now? I just feel it. So there your big cousins moved by some internal logic to their music of their own, and they're impervious and unseen by the rest of Philly. But being with them was like the VIP for you, right?
Yeah.
It's the most delicious and segregated social club. And what did your cousins teach you about growing up and becoming a woman, and about your own city? Because one thing is your parents and your generations, right? But then your cousins, that's a whole different world that,
yes,
it's a different experience for us that our parents really don't know. And they probably did with their own, right? What was that? What was that whole world that they opened up for you?
My cousins were my idols. I was the youngest one. So 13 years after I was born, my sister was born. So my sister became the youngest one. But honestly, she was so young. She was just kind of in the next generation.
Right.
So I was the baby and I was just in awe. Like there was, Ode was very funny. All right, well, I'm going to use book names in this. So let me get back into these book names. So I had a cousin, Kuka. She was the kind and gentle one and so pleasant. What a pleasant energy. And she was so loyal to Abuela. She took care of Abuela. So that's what I got from her. I wanted to be kind like her. She was so like graceful and pretty, had a great laugh. Great smile. And she was one of the ones, she was so comfortable with her body. She'd just like, you'd be getting dressed, she'd be getting dressed, she'd be walking around, everything showing. And this is how I learned what beautiful women's bodies look like. Because my cousins were not ashamed of their bodies and their bodies all look different. So they're skinny, they're fat, they're dark, they're light, they're everything. And they all walked around like theirs was the most natural body in the world. And so that's one of the things they taught me. So that was Kuka. And then we had Nucci, who was just, her energy was like so intense and explosive. And she's so tall and stunning, and she had a lot of kids, so she was kind of the elder. Then there's Flor, who I really, really was close with her. She was the jokester. She always made me laugh, and I was always awkward. I was like the awkward kid, and she'd always be like, she loved my awkwardness. She was like, come on, work it, work it. There was Mary Lou, who died young, and she was just a hoot. She would be on SNL if she was alive, because she was just had such a performative energy. This woman could dance like, I don't even know, like she didn't have joints. She could dance like everything of her could move independently. And so, and that's just the females, and that's just some of them. And I'm just watching in awe. Even the way they tied their shoelaces, they would make Payless shoes just, look like the new Jordans had dropped or something. Like they had so much style.
Swag, right? The swag that it's beautiful to see how much we can influence one another, but there's a sense of loyalty always, right? Our differences, we criticize one another in a way that it's like, girl, we're uplifting each other. You have to move this way, you have to move that way, but it's also like you're protected, you're in a safe place. That environment of what I can't speak to my mom about, at least I can speak to my cousins about and get like the real juice, right?
Well, I wasn't sure, I did trust them to a certain extent, but they were also like, they were always telling dirty jokes I didn't get. Like, so I wasn't totally sure. And that day when they took me to Six Flags, which to me was like, it was like being tapped into the best secret society possible. I was so happy and so honored. And then I got totally sick in the car and I didn't know what it was. I'd never felt that way before. And they were so nice to me. I felt guilty because I thought I had ruined the good time. They packed so much. They packed their cooler full of their lunch and everything. Like this was
ham, cheese, mustard, everything.
And the potato chips and the platanutres and all that. And I couldn't even make it out of the parking lot. And I was like, I ruined it. They're never going to let me back into the club. And they were so generous to me. Like that's when I knew. And then getting home and finally getting to the bathroom after 10 hours of being in a car and seeing what the hell had happened to my underwear. And I was young. I was like 10 or 11. So that was not on my radar yet. And I was just like, Kuka, ayúdame. And let me tell you, you can always tell the flat, like however someone reacts, it's that first look in their eyes. That's the truth. Then however they cover it up. The second
right.
But that first second, it was the joy. It was joy. And I thought, okay, my body just did something kind of weird and super gross. And her response is joy. And that's how those are the things that stick with you. When your body fails you, when you're a woman, you remember, well, my body did something weird once and I was uplifted by the women in my family. Like my body might be doing something weird again, like when I had babies, but I know I'll be uplifted again.
Right. And there's nothing like your grandma's underwear.
Yeah, granny panties. You have to tell you, in the 80s, we would like tuck over the ankle and then fold them up so they'd be real tight because abuela's panties were too big for me. So I had to like tuck it over and fold it down so it would stay up. You know, I had to get inventive, but they felt so good.
Listen, I still have one of my grandma's panties. I will not let it go. It's my comfort ones. I can't.
Listen, they came up to like here on me.
Come on.
You know, I have a joke in one of my plays that is like the granny panties, they're like a turtleneck, you know?
But they're the best. They're the best. Uncomparable. Now, there's a scene in which you watch your aunts and cousins dance at a 4th of July party, but you sit on the stairs and watch them, and you say that you didn't have the courage to join them.
Yeah.
What were you seeing as you watched them? Why did you decide to observe versus join? What was going through your mind?
You know, so the year is 1991, and we had already had some family losses due to some of the stuff that was going on in the nation that we already talked about, the AIDS and the addiction. And in 1991, Bachata Rosa came out. So that was a big deal. That was a very big deal. And that's what got played on loop. And I remember it's like the tape player didn't even close. So you have to duct tape the tape player close, and then the tape gets melted in the sun. And then you got to go to Sam Goody and spend another $7.99 or whatever it was back then. And they just danced and danced and danced to Bachata Rosa, which is a Juan Luis Guerra album. That was really important. And I watched from the steps. They're all dancing. And I think even by that time, I was in middle school. And even by that time, I had already kind of retreated into myself. I was a watcher more than an experiencer. And there were benefits of that, but there were also elements that, you know, were kind of a bummer from that. So I think in some ways, the benefits are, I was watching it going, I already liked to read a lot at that point. I was watching it going, you know, this is the best novel I have never read. I've read these great novels. This is a great novel. So honestly, I'm looking at it like I'm alone with the book in the middle of the night, you know, past my bedtime. Like, it was so beautiful. Also knowing they were dancing so hard and so ferocious, and also knowing what was in the background, that was a year that we really suffered. There were funerals. One of my favorite cousins, Flor, was not at that party. She had already begun her struggles with addiction, and thank God she lived to tell. And now, you know, I just got to see her, and she's doing very well. That was not a lasting struggle in her life, thank goodness. And there was something about knowing the backdrop of this loss and this grief, and yet the joy and the exuberance. I could almost not believe it. It was like we were healing ourselves through dancing. But I didn't join the dance. And because I didn't totally understand the dance. I was between cultures. I was young. I was like the bookish, nerdish one. And then at a certain point, it was many years before I joined the dance. And actually, writing is what gave me the courage. I would say I started dancing with them at like opening nights of my plays in college. Like, that's when I got the courage. Right.
Wow. If you had the chance to go back now, would you dance?
Hell yes. God, yeah.
I mean, I would go with you, girl.
Yes. And you would be overfed, and you would be staying at Abuela's house for a month at least, no doubt, until you were like, get me out of here. These people are crazy.
Right. In our granny panties. Right. You don't know. And that is what I found very interesting, that you chose to observe. But I've been in those positions myself, and I think a lot of us have been in our communities, where what we're reading and what we're taught, right? We're reading it and we appreciate it, yes, but we don't feel it, right? Like, there's something about reading your book that I felt like, wow, it's important to have that feeling of relativity in our stories. And that is definitely something that is important now for school, you know, to incorporate in our curriculums, right? To have stories that are as diverse as we are. In the scene, you chose to do that, and you speak about now how important it was to observe. And I think that that allowed you now to be a great storyteller by just observing and watching the details and being able to like write them. And, you know, the book is called My Broken Language, but there's a chapter where you talk about your mom's English and her accent, right?
Yeah.
How did her relationship with language help you discover your own?
So English was not my mom's first language, it was Spanish. And I've also learned some other languages from her. Just today, she was talking me through some Taino words when we were on the phone earlier today. And she gave me books that incorporated Yoruba language as part of her spiritual life so that I could learn about it. And so, you know, because I'm also much lighter skinned than my mom. And so oftentimes, like when I was a teenager, friends would be surprised when they came home and met my family. They'd be like, oh, what's going on here? We also got strangers in the park, like asking if she was my nanny and if she was looking for more work, that sort of thing. You know, there's a line in the book where this is a response I remember her giving more than once. I'm her mother. Have a blessed day. You know, that would be her stock response to that inquiry. And there was this notion I grew up with that like I got English from my dad and Spanish from my mom because those were their first languages. And then at a certain point, I started realizing like, in some ways, my mom had to earn English and work harder for English than a native speaker, right? Like she is so inventive with the language and her accent is beautiful and very melodious. But I was like, you know, maybe my mom gave me English too, and in a really different and special way because I was born into it. I kind of like came with English, but like she had to work for it and earn it. Right. And there's something special, therefore, about her relationship with it. In some ways, it mirrors the conversation about immigrants. You know, immigrants have to work harder for their Americanness than those of us who are just born here and get it automatically. And so if you just look at it on paper, their on their resume, like they've had to earn it. In some ways, they are therefore more American. And so, you know, the chapter on her accent is just, it's very short. It's like a page and a half. And it's my love letter to how she speaks and it's my thank you for the English that she gave me.
Well, there's also a scene there that your mom gets a prank call where someone calls her a whore and she spins that word on its head. Can you speak a little about that?
So, yes, we're getting a bunch of crank calls one night and I'm answering the phone, and this is not the first night this has happened. And on the other end, they're saying, your mother's a whore, and hanging up. Now, I had honestly gotten so used to it, and it always happened when I was watching The Simpsons, so it must have been like 7 o'clock or so, and my mom was rarely home that early. She worked out in the community. She worked late, and I'd be home alone. But she happened to be home this night, and she was hearing the phone ring, and she was getting really pissed. She's like, tell your friends to stop calling. And so finally, she answered the phone, and she's like, oh, this is what's been happening? I'm like, yeah, she heard herself. She got called whore, and they hung up the phone. And then she kind of smiled a little bit. She's like, let me answer again. She answers the phone and they say, you know, you whore. And she says, thank you. And they hang up the phone. I was like, what's happening? Again, I'm in middle school here. You know, I didn't understand the way the world worked. She answers, next time the phone rings, 10 seconds later, she just answers, she says, give it to me. And they say, whore. And then she goes, thank you. She hangs up the phone. She's thanking God in the sky. I'm like, Mom, what are you talking about? This is not funny. This is
you know what this means?
She says, how do we say whore? En el barrio. I was like, puta, I don't know. She's like, yeah, you know, but how else do we say whore en el barrio? I was like, a hoe? And she's like, yes, what is a hoe? And I'm like, okay, a hoe is a woman who's shamed for her sexuality. See, I had learned that much in middle school. And she's like, that's right. It's the shame that's put on us from the very beginning. She's like, but what else is hoe? And I'm like, I don't know. Can you just tell me the answer? So finally she does tell me the answer. She says asada. Asada, what is a hoe? And I'm like, oh, a gardening tool. And she's like, that's right. It's a tool to break the tired earth and turn it over and make it new. So they think they're slandering me. But what they're actually doing is saying that I am planting seeds and rejuvenating the earth. And she was just laughing to high heaven. And this is why I had to write a chapter saying, thank you for giving me your English language, Mom, because she taught me that to be called a whore, they don't even know. They don't even know.
Your mom trolled them right back. That's right. That's what we are. We break the ground. Yes. Cheers to that, honey. Now, I wanted to ask you something about the love letter to the Perez women in your family. I think it's so special, especially how their bodies and the way they move and how you speak about that, but how you decided to end the book that way.
Yeah.
You write about their nakedness, yes, and how beautiful it is. But you say something, and we need to hear it. I needed to hear that our bodies are a declaration. Our bodies are a declaration. And for me, that's very important. You know, I'm a huge advocate for women empowerment and loving ourselves and making that a priority, and that sacrifices.
Hashtag I smell good. Hashtag lovery.
But do I though, Quiara? But do I
wanted you to do this event, Dascha.
Hello. You can let them know we was hot, but I still smell good throughout the summer. So why did you choose to end the book this way?
It's the last chapter of the book. And honestly, like, it's my favorite thing I've ever written. And so everything else after having written that for me is gravy. And the reason it's my favorite thing I've ever written is because I feel so good about putting it out into the world. So positive about that. And what it is it's me describing all of the naked female bodies I saw growing up. As I mentioned before, there were a lot of silences in my family, and a lot of those were entangled in shame. But one area where there was like not a lot of shame was our nakedness, our bodies. So I saw cellulite, I saw the C-section scars, and they're not the dainty little ones I have. They were like some Frankenstein legit things.
Right.
And it's not that I saw them as people were running to get dressed. It'd be like, look at my scar, look at my cellulite, look at my sagging breasts. Like, people would be showing their bodies, and I saw this, and the bodies were different because of our family is a real diaspora family. We have, you know, the African, the Taino, the European, it was all there. And so you saw every body type. You saw a lot of very large women, show pouchy bellies, like flat abs. Come on, it was not happening in my family. You know, you saw big asses, you saw flat butts, you saw it all. And one of the things I realized, pubic hair, a lot of it. Okay.
Really?
And it was just very au natural. And it was mostly women. And I think this was not happening in the company of men. It was like a female vibe. And we came from, in Arecibo and in Lares, we were farmers. That's our background. We were people of the soil, working the soil. You know, you've heard about the hoe, the asada. By the time we moved to Philadelphia, the Perez family, by the time we get gentrified out of the kind of 19th and Callow Hill pocket where there's still green space and old trees, we get gentrified farther and farther north to where there's not a tree on the block. There's not a park with a tree at the end of the block, nothing like that. We become so disconnected from the Mother Earth, from the planet Earth, that actually the only plot of land we had left was our bodies. And so we're just in all this rubble. We're in a concrete neighborhood, but our bodies are national parks. And so that's how I describe it. I describe Nucci's, kind of sunken eyes. She had like deep eyes. I describe her cheekbones as the Badlands, as erosion. I describe like Abuela's flat breast that would just kind of cascade over her belly. That was a waterfall to me. And so we still were even though we were deeply disconnected from something that was important to us, which was the earth, we still were earth women. We still were women of the earth.
What a beautiful way to end the book. What a beautiful, how necessary is that? And, I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this, as I said before, and to be able to speak to you and be part of your life and continue to be part of your life, but also to have this conversation that is so necessary about our stories and our bodies and how beautiful, our experiences can be. And what better than to speak about our experiences more so than anything. I think we're in a time right now that we are all women. We all have, we all want equality. We all want to fight for what's right. We all want to love and let live. We want to respect each other, and we want to break barriers, but we also want to have healthy boundaries and make ourselves priorities. I think that one of the things that I read throughout, a theme of the book was joy, feminine joy, family, resilience, the positivity in all. We all have tragedy, and we could sit at tragedy, but to be able to be resilient and to come from that and to celebrate the good and the time we have here is what I got from it. And that being said, this has been great speaking to you about your memoir. We have to celebrate this, but we're going to take some time to speak to the audience, right, Samira? And
yes, I'm sorry to interrupt. We wanted to make time for the audience to ask some questions, but that conversation was wonderful. Thank you both so much.
Dascha, it's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure. I knew I was like, I want to talk to Dascha about these things because I just had a feeling from our time on set that we were going to be able to get honest with each other about these topics, which I really appreciate.
Thank you. Thank you. So I don't know if we wait here and we ask the questions, or what do we do?
Cool. I'll start pulling them up. So our first question is from Shang, who asks, Quiara, how does your mother's spirituality filter into your writing?
That's a big component of the book too. So one of my earliest memories is of her telling me about the first time the dead came to her. And I didn't understand, in the sense that I had never had that experience. I was 5 years old, but I trusted my mom. I didn't know my mom to be a liar or an exaggerator. She was speaking her truth to me. And so that was amazing to me. But also part of me was like, I'm never going to be that amazing. I remember thinking that too. She's different and she's special. And she asked me, do you have this gift? And I was like, I don't think so. And she was like, well, it might be in there. I remember her saying that. Then by the time I'm a preteen, her spiritual life really flourishes. She becomes a santera in Lukumi. She becomes crowned for Chango. Our living room becomes the site of some pretty extraordinary ceremonial practices. I get to meet a community of elders who teach me about the Afro-Caribbean roots and who are her elders and teachers. I witnessed my mother in spirit possession. These were also, and again, I'm watching from the stairs, just like in the dance party. So at a certain point, I think life told me, you have to get down from the stairs and you have to move your body in its own way. And I did that by starting to explore the history and starting to tell the stories. And I should add that the book also does dramatize a few moments in my writing life as I was becoming a writer, that something happens to me that I can't explain and that I don't understand, in which I lose myself. And it's a very intense physical experience. I feel like I'm choking, I'm shaking, I feel like I'm going to throw up, and I kind of regain consciousness, and I have written something that happens a few times in the book. And I think that experience connects me with my mom.
Our next question is from Amaya, who asks, how did gender roles in your family frame your childhood? Was machismo something you were exposed to? If so, when did you realize what these gender roles meant for the women in your family and also other cultures?
By birth, my family was very matriarchal, just a lot of females. And it tended to be, not exclusively, you know, I had male cousins, I had a Theo that I was very close with, but because they were so outnumbered and it was a lot of women at Abuela's house, it tended to be the dudes would like go hang out elsewhere and the women would really hold forth. And in that sense, to me, the women held all genders. The women were machismo. The women were feminine and prudish. The women represented many different kinds of gender energies, sometimes as individuals, but sometimes all mixed up within certain ones. So that was something about my cousins. You know, I saw women who were very macho, who were strong as hell and would kick your ass if you stepped or if you disrespected. And I also saw women who were gentle, nurturing spirits. So machismo was something, it wasn't alien to me. Of course, I witnessed it in the community, but luckily it never inhibited me.
Right.
Our next question is from Anonymous, but they say, I teach theater in the Bronx. Your stories resonate so much with my students. What advice would you have for young playwrights looking to share their stories with the world? And I'd also like to open this up a little to Dascha, if you'd have any advice too for young actors or actresses who haven't seen themselves on stage.
Dascha, you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that especially coming from urban communities at the time that we did as an actor, as an artist, I think I always say start writing. I think it's important for us to understand that it's great to be an actor. Yes, you want to be in front of the camera, but it's so necessary to write and to have writers and to have directors and producers behind it. And I think for me, if I was to go back in time and take the courage and the risk to actually put myself through theater and acting school, it would start off by me writing and telling my story and not trying to play a role and kind of like play my role through my storytelling, right? And bring that forth in the forefront. I think that's where the key is, and that's what brings authenticity and uniqueness when we start like embracing and realizing how powerful our stories are as actors, as artists. I think it creates our own niche and our own road for us to move forward, which is kind of like what you did, Quiara. I don't want to take up too much time, but I did want to say something that resonated a lot in the book, and I wanted to say it before we ended, and it was that phrase, today is my day, I think was something that definitely I kept in my mind. And I realized, wow, what a great way to make this. Today is your day. Quiara, today is your day, right? And that's something for those aspiring to be, right? Make today your day. Don't worry about anybody else's day. Make today your day. And that's, I think it's important for us to understand. When you make things your day and you make it about you and you just take the risk and move forward, that's all it takes.
I would, I'm so glad Dasha's here proselytizing about right. There's a line in the In the Heights movie, which is at a protest, someone shouting, tell our stories. It's so important, and they do not last forever. They do disappear if they are not recorded. The thing I would say to young writer is it's hard. It's a lifelong process, but this notion of should is a word you got to work really hard to get rid of. A story should sound like this. A poem should go like this. Someone who's literary or smart should, have this vibe. No. Your job is to figure out what's in there. And you might think you know, but actually there's a lot that you haven't voiced yet. So your job is to put those shoulds aside, find out what's in here, and that takes work. So go deep, do the work to, get away from the shoulds and figure out the what must be from within.
It actually segues rather beautifully into a question we have from Facebook. and it's from Miriam, who asks, has Spanish and Spanglish allowed you to hack into English? Like, do you find it's given you insight into how you use English or opened up new possibilities for it?
It's, whenever I'm in Spanish, I'm always translating in my mind. And so you do notice the contrasts so much that way. One of the things that drives me crazy about the English language is that there's no plural you, like there is in Spanish. And that really irks me. It seems like such an utter deficiency of the English language, because pluralizing I is we. These plurals are necessary because you're talking in community. And it's the same with when you want to address a group of people and essentially connect them by making it plural, you're connecting people. English is missing out on that. That's one that always rubs me. Like whenever I'm on Twitter, I'm like, y'all, like that's the best it gets. And that's fine. But yeah, maybe y'all should probably be added to the Scrabble dictionary. Make Scrabble games better, and it will make speech better too.
And our next question is from Bella Ianelli, who says, hi, it's little Bella from the In the Heights movie, and you both inspire me so much. What advice do you have for me growing up with so much social media pressure?
Girl, I need advice too. Woo! What do you think, Quiara?
I mean, listen, I'm a writer, so I'm naturally behind the scenes more. I've been very active recently because I am so proud of this book and want to let the world know about it and want to share it with the world. But just as frequently, like, get rid of the should. I should be putting myself out there all times. Like, no. I should be putting myself out there now because I feel in the mood to share. I feel in the mood to inspire community. I feel in the mood to let the world know about this beautiful thing I'm working on. Okay, then there's times when it's like, and I'm going to take care of myself now. And I don't need that for the next 3 weeks. Let me turn that off. Let me delete the apps. Let me throw away the key and, flush it down the toilet. And I honestly, those times are really, really necessary for me. Because otherwise it's just creative. It's just like the creative stuff is blocked by all the input. It's too much input all the time. So I have to turn it off sometimes.
I think definitely, Bella, my advice to you is finding balance. And I think that it's really hard because the youth, this is what their life is basically, right? It's like, this is what they're social. This is how they keep social. This is how they connect. But I think that once you disconnect yourself in a way that you start experiencing and being present in the moment and just witnessing and observing and feeling and using your sensory as much as you can, I think you'll be able to enjoy it. I take breaks all the time. I pop on and I pop off. It's part of our community now, yes, but I think that you definitely have to find what's the true balance for you. And it'll take some time, but you'll get there. Whatever makes you healthy mentally and frees you in the moment, then you'll know intuitively when it's right.
We have time for just one last question. So I think I'll go with Ileana from Facebook, who asks, what's your favorite thing you've written? I haven't read My Broken Language yet, but In the Heights is my favorite. So it seems like she's thrown down a gauntlet.
One of the joys and heartbreaks of being a writer is that sometimes you love the thing, and sometimes the thing that you put so much care and attention and heart into for years, it still doesn't get where you want it to go. And I've had pieces that I was like, this is done. This thing it's perfect as it is. And I've had things that it's like by the third and fourth production, I'm still like, didn't quite figure it out, and that's so hard. It's very painful. And so I have to say I'm in a really, it almost makes me want to cry because I don't take it for granted. I'm in a really blessed situation right now where my 3 favorite things I've ever written are happening all at once. It's this book and the In the Heights movie And Lynn Manuel and I also wrote an animated movie called Vivo with Kirk DeMicco, who's the director and co-writer. And not to say I've written plays that I absolutely love, so I'm not diminishing them. I'm just saying, like, to have 3 that I feel so passionately about all happening at once, I don't take that for granted. It's a tremendous, tremendous blessing and a huge relief because it's not stressful. You know, I can just celebrate.
Right.
On that note, thank you both so much for a fantastic conversation, a fantastic evening. To our audience, thank you for spending your evening with us and partaking in this fantastic conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
I want to thank everyone. I want to thank the audience. Like, I'm looking over here in the chats and I'm like, wow, I got strangers and neighbors over here. Like, I love it. So I want to thank all the audience, people I've never met and people who've been with me since day one. I see over there in the chats. I love y'all. Many of y'all are in the book. I want to thank Dascha for just, for hashtag self-lovery. That's it, it all boiled to that. And hashtag I smell good. I love that. And that's what got me, I think, that spirit to say, do you want to talk about
Girl, you've been smelling good, girl. You've been doing that. Come on. All those spiritual influences. We know what's that about. We know it. We're so proud of our culture and our ancestors are embracing where we're from, our roots, our African, Taino, our European, all of our experiences. We are very proud and we embrace it and we move forward and we continue to write, we continue to influence. And I am very thankful. It's my first time at the Strand. I hope it repeats itself.
And thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much. So necessary.
So everyone, have a blessed evening.
Yay!